Welcome, everybody. Come on in. Thank you very much for this. We have a really good topic today. Something I've been wanting to do for a long time now, which is let's go through every single area that Tesla could actually improve or have a cost advantage, a gross margin advantage. And we've invited Jeff Lutz here. He's the perfect person. He is a senior executive who's currently consulting with some of the top mega cap companies today, and his experience is in manufacturing, it's in supply chain, it's in marketing. And so he's been looking at, as many of us, all the different ways that Tesla has a advantage and be able to increase gross margin, reduce costs. We'll go through that list right now. It's a big long list. Go ahead, Jeff. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing, Herbert?
I'm doing great. I'm very happy that I'm finally addressing this topic. So, if we take a look at this list here that we created, this is a lot of this came from a tweet that you sent out, which we'll review. But you can see that there's a number of areas, and certainly there's probably more that we haven't even addressed. But we're going to go through each one of these and have your opinion and kind of explain to us why these are advantages as compared to other car manufacturers out there. So we'll go through each this list right now, but as we move forward here, let's go through the kind of how this started. You have this tweet that you sent out, I don't know, felt like a couple months ago, but you pinned it. You had it pinned on your Twitter account, and it says Tesla's gross margin advantage is structural, not volume driven. Can you just quickly explain what you meant by that?
Yeah, these are all the things that, that list that was on the prior slide, and some of it's here. These are all the things that Tesla does before the first unit ships or before a single unit ships that is really cost and gross margin focus, where it's really focused on giving a solid or very premium user experience for what consumers, perceive as valued. But everything that's, quote unquote under the hood, not to be cliche, but Tesla does it in a very gross margin efficient manner, and it affords them the opportunity to do things like FSD and to put it in each and every car, put that hardware in every car. So, but the point I wanted to make with the tweet was, it's not just because Tesla is ramping up in volume that they have
Mhm.
decent gross margins. The other car manufacturers ship a lot more volume. Toyota, GM and Ford, they ship a lot more volume than Tesla, but they don't have gross margins that are better or greater. And so the point here was they're doing all these things structurally that give them that advantage. So when they actually do scale and they actually do pass forward, probably in the
Yeah.
next year, passing BMW and Mercedes, they're just only going to widen that moat.
Perfect. Okay, gotcha. All right. So you did list out a number of items, which we will go through in detail: design, process, operational, percentage of sales, the vertical integration, inventory, and so forth. And you did say volume growth only widens the moat. And then you shared this graph, which we absolutely love. Do you want to talk us through this?
Yeah, I grabbed this from another publication. This is Q3 data, but it's just really showing the net profit per vehicle sold. And again, this is data from late last year, but it's still kind of relatively stands with with where everything else is in the market today. So it's really just showing the from an EV perspective, BYD's barely profitable. This is all auto, by the way. It's not if they're shipping EV or um,
Oh, okay.
or combustion. But even just from an EV perspective, the only other manufacturer that's even barely positive is BYD, and we don't know where they're at today because they've taken a number of cost or excuse me MSRP reductions as well. So
Okay, good. Let's go through the next. I saw this, which was a tweet that you replied to just, I think it was yesterday, and
it's
this
connected,
Brian
yeah.
Sullivan. Yeah, he said 90,000 for a small, oddly shaped Mercedes that probably gets 250 real world miles per charge. Give me a slightly used 2020 E Class, and I'll buy the carbon credits with the 40,000 left over. I mean, it's too expensive for a small amount of miles per charge. This is what this car looks like. And then he showed in in a I guess a magazine the base price and just some of the metrics for it. And then you replied to him saying none of the legacy car makers are at EV scale or have supply. So their value per dollar is suboptimal, prompting reactions like this.
Yeah, and it's also the structural bit we just talked about as well. But even if you go, from a scale perspective, these EV lines that are running at these auto manufacturers, none of them are up at the kind of scale that they run at with their combustion engines. So, from an overhead perspective, when you're actually attributing the cost structure to the product line that you're building, you're doing that kind of cost accounting. This is what's similar to what Ford just did when they broke out EV and they have a negative 102 percent EBIT margin. This is the kind of this is what happens. They price their EVs pretty high, and this is just these are and they also play the options game, which is when versus when you buy a Tesla, there are a few options, but you basically mostly everything is in the car itself. So yeah, I mean, yeah, you from a cost perspective, that car was at 70 to $90,000
Mhm.
base. And I just recommended him. I said, you wouldn't buy that car. You go buy a Tesla Model Y, which is a similar CUV, a crossover form factor, and you get that car for 50. And so that's I mean that just shows the disparity today of their 250-mile CUV EV for Mercedes and what Tesla is shipping in the Model Y. And it goes back to the value per dollar concept, which is as a consumer, for every dollar I'm spending, like what am I getting? And then he actually did it in his tweet. He's like, for this amount of dollars, I would go get an E-Class. And
Mhm.
so the value per dollar piece is not there yet for EVs on from legacy, and it's gonna take them a while. It's gonna take them, I believe, a number of years, to get there, or they're just gonna run at, a significant loss for a number of years, to get there.
Okay. Well, let's go take a look at that list again that we created here. So these are the advantages that you think Tesla has that can improve the gross margin. And as we go through this list, this operational expense, design and manufacturing vertical integration, the rate of innovation, uh, the
Yeah.
unboxing process is something that's coming in the future, gigacastings, inventory, the local geography, supply chain, raw materials, which is, I guess, equivalent to the vertical integration, design process, software, FSE take rate, supercharger network, insurance, minimal marketing, and a bunch of others. But by taking a look into this list, just overall, do you have like a sense of which one do you think is really the greatest advantage as compared to other car manufacturers, and which ones of these the other manufacturers are just really not even doing at all?
You know what? I think there's an unwritten thing on this list, which is the culture and the CEO of the company. It's I honestly believe all of this is being driven by
Yeah.
Elon and his staff, who he has mentored and hired, himself, right? And you saw in Investor Day, most of them are 10-plus year Tesla employees, and that's inside of his staff, and so his staff is bringing it down to their teams. But it really all starts with Elon. Everything in Here's what I think is happening on the inside. He's putting aggressive performance. When I mean the performance of a particular area, um, let's say the electric motor. He's putting aggressive performance, like efficiency targets on that team, but he also gave them the sub $1,000 target for Gen 3, and that is, I would say, a CEO getting into that level of detail and working with the team. That's probably more unique than uh, than what I think would be widely believed. I don't believe that that's happening in every company. In fact, I would say that in my experience, especially in my consulting business, I would say it's pretty rare when the top leader is probably assigning budgetary constraints per module in the car and kind of saying, look, like this Gen 3 vehicle, I'm sure he's put a number on it where the team needs to get to. And what they do is they probably look at cost in two ways. They look at it like, what's the launch cost? Like, where are we going to be when we ship in the first quarter? And then where are we going to be throughout its lifetime? And Because you could develop a product forever. You could develop an auto for 2 or 3 years and continue to just refine it and pull things in. But I think they actually start with an aggressive target and they start with an aggressive date. And what they try to do is they get as much in as possible for that launch because they know that's where you're going to get, the biggest bang, and you minimize the most cost. And then I believe they also successively introduce um, event-driven cost reductions throughout the life cycle. So I think the one thing to answer your question is actually the culture
Mhm.
and the highest leader in the company kind of demanding this excellence, both from a performance perspective and from a cost envelope perspective. I believe there's budgets assigned for each of these areas.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very good point, actually. Glad that you brought that back up because, right, we know that Elon and Tesla has been so laser focused on cost efficiencies. When he did Investor Day, it was kind of interesting that he went through every single department and each department talked about how they're reducing cost. He's talked about the factory is the product and that it's so critical that, he's many times he's been interviewed and he talked about how you need to bring the price of the car down, otherwise it's not going to be affordable, all those things. So yes, very good point, and that's kind of underlines everything we just said here. Let's go through each of the topics here and we'll just go through each one. Now we put down at the bottom here volume growth because the point you're making is that each of these things are structural, meaning that they're part of how the company creates cars, and that's before scale. And as you do scale, once you have all of this in place, the scale just supercharges everything, makes everything
Yep.
even more and more
Yeah,
important.
that's a good way to describe it. And the inverse of this is if you don't do this kind of stuff
Yeah,
and you try to scale, you're going to be inefficient
yeah,
and you're going to have low
yeah,
gross margins, which we may be seeing right now from Tesla's
yeah.
competition. That's why when people talk about where's GM
Mhm.
and Ford going to be in 26, I know Ford's having a capital markets day. Where they're going to be in a couple of years, I believe is still behind where Tesla showed where they're going to be on Investor Day. I believe they're still trying to catch up to the Model 3, Model Y type design efficiency and performance. So, yeah, the inverse of this is that if you don't do the structural things and you try to
Yeah.
scale, you're going to scale inefficiently and have low gross margins.
Okay, great points, left, right, and center here, Jeff. Thank you for that. And so let's start with the first one: operational expense as a percentage of sales.
Yeah, this is where OpEx. So, you hear the term OpEx or operational expense is these are the costs that are not um, product. These are not in the bill of material. This is not in the assembly. This is the engineering, the technical operations support. This is everything done, to develop the car, the prototypes that are not shipping, all of that material that's used for the development of the product but doesn't actually ship and is not bought by a consumer. That's an OpEx. And you saw Tesla was one of the first companies early, and they actually got a little bit of a heat from the market when Tesla announced that they were doing those layoffs. Remember, Tesla did
Mhm.
their layoffs in May or June of last year. Nobody was doing layoffs, and I believe that
Mhm.
that was their foresight in terms of like, hey, this is going to get bumpy over the next year. And actually, they did their employees a great service, quite frankly, by being kind of first out. They come out in the marketplace with the most amount of opportunities, and so I think from an OpEx perspective they do a they do a fantastic job of, like, keeping kind of like a light framework or structure. The other thing, and this kind of merges into the next topic around vertical integration, they have vertical integration from a design development perspective. Their software is in-house. Their hardware development is in-house. At other auto manufacturers, that electric motor is being designed by another company. Those inverters are being designed by another company. The infotainment system, the hardware, the software, that's being done by another company. And then basically what the Ford or GM type company will do is they'll do integration of those parts. They'll manage those suppliers. They'll manage those other design groups and say, hey, I want my infotainment system to go from like this level of feature and functionality from this generation to this level. There's a product manager on it. There's a design liaison, but they're not designing those things in house in most cases. So the OpEx piece of it becomes really inefficient because if you pay another company to do that development work, you're most likely you're going to be paying them. They want to make money, so they're gonna it's gonna be if you do ABC cost accounting, how many engineers are on it, how much time are they spending? They're gonna want to add a margin on top of that. So I believe that's an inefficient approach to engineering. Um, and I believe if you're doing a smaller number of models, smaller number of SKUs, and more purpose built, you would vertically integrate because you're not paying that margin on those employees and again, some companies do this as well. If they're in a very high cost center or high cost geography, they would, try to buy engineers in a lower cost geography to do this work. That happens, but in the end, I don't believe it produces superior product. And when you have those situations like what we had with the supply shocks, with the silicon issues, when you have to go and substitute a part, and that info, and it's in the infotainment system, and it's being designed by a company you know, in you know, in France or whatever, wherever you're using the company, you got to go interface with that team. They're going to come up with their own test plan they're going to go have to go look for, the part replacement. It's not going to be on your time schedule. But if you're all kind of in the same four walls and you're under the same kind of pressure that they probably feel from Elon and the direct staff, they're going to act with the same kind of urgency. They're all wearing Tesla badges. So that OpEx piece is partly, Tesla is just very efficient with the number of resources, but they're also vertically integrated from a design perspective. I think is the other key takeaway.
Yeah. That's another big one, right? Because this is the difference. This is the big difference. In 2012, when Tesla was at the stage of creating the high volume car, the Model S and the Roadster, when you compare their financials right now to where Ford is today and where Rivian and Lucid are today, it's crazy. At that point, Tesla's expense was only $2 billion a year, and of course, it was all negative and unprofitable. But Ford and Rivian are closer to 10 to 20 $1 million. And like, where are you spending that money? As compared to how Tesla was able to do it. And that's how they survive. And then that's how they're able to now take advantage of that.
Correct.
So, okay, that was operational expense, which was a big one. The next one is vertical integration, design and manufacturing.
Yeah. So very adept in this process. This is something that all OEM original equipment manufacturers they kind of go through this discipline, which is it's called, and sometimes it's called in the industry, a make versus buy process. And what you're trying to determine is, what do you do better than others? What do you have IP over that you would prefer to not share and have out in the marketplace? And from a cost perspective, is there something that you could do better, faster, cheaper than putting it on the outside? Sometimes there are superior companies that have efficiencies or have access to labor or have a patented process that could actually take your design and do it more efficiently than you doing it. So sometimes there are reasons to put product on the outside, but this is really gets to the core and structure of when you set your original gross margin targets and you try to understand, you know, between you and the consumer, like every single component that goes in that car and every single thing that's done in the factory to make that car, is that value going out the door to consumers? Is that something that they're going to see, feel, and experience? And when you're outsourcing, in many respects, they're not going to, that margin you pay to that outsource company to build that module or to actually assemble the whole, in the case of Fisker, the entire car is built by a contract manufacturer. That's value, that contract manufacturer, wants to make a margin on that car, and they make a margin on top of the entire bill of material that they procure. That's value though that you're paying to somebody internally that doesn't actually get out to the end user, and that's arguable. People can argue with you on that, saying, "Well, if the external manufacturer is better, that is value for the consumer." But if you develop, this is why Elon says the factory is the product, one of the many reasons. But if you can do that more efficiently, and if there's things that you can do from a kind of a manufacturing proprietary perspective, like the unboxing process in the future, or how they test the product in line. Um, there's so many different things they do, but the point is that in the beginning you make this decision: could I make it better, or could I put it on the outside and have have a better quality product and have it come in and meet my cost structure? And in the case of Tesla, what they've decided over time is that vertical integration, is just drives a much better value, and they believe with scale and over time that, remember, if in the beginning that was a big tax on Tesla actually doing vertical integration, because they were doing vertical integration at low volumes. If you're a low volume manufacturer, let's say Fisker, for example, and you go outsource to a high volume company for stampings, you go to a high volume company for assembly, well, then you can, pool together their efficiencies that they're getting from building high volumes, and you could get some of those cost reductions. You're still going to pay them a margin though. So when Tesla actually gets to scale, and they're at, significant scale right now in their factories, but as those factories get to greater and greater scale, they're going to um, they're going to reap all those efficiencies themselves and not have to pay anybody a margin, to outsource the product. So that's why vertical integration is key. Also, I believe that they have manufacturing techniques on their motors, inverters, that are probably proprietary. Their specifications, what they do, from a quality perspective, and I believe if they keep them on the inside, I think that's a good thing for them. So when you're thinking about vertical integration, it comes down to IP, it comes down to cost structure, and it comes down to scale. And if you can figure out how to do that internally, and you have the scale, you're going to end up on the positive side from a gross margin perspective pretty much every time.
Yeah. I interviewed Corey Steuben of Monroe and Associates, and he told me the history that when Ford or obviously reinvented the way manufacturing of the production line in the Model T, they were vertically integrated. They were very vertically integrated, and that's how they were able to reduce costs. But in the 70s and 80s, in the early 70s, late 70s, with inflation, all the car manufacturers started moving to the best of breed and partnering with as many suppliers out there
Yep.
because the executives, were actually incented for the way the incentive worked was that's how they decided to go that route because of the cost of the cost of employees and so forth. So it's now backfiring on them because now it's kind of just
Right.
ironic that Tesla's doing this and Ford is not able to do this. They're stuck to that world. um, okay, so rate of innovation, velocity, you put down velocity. What was your point here?
Yeah, they're a couple different things. The velocity piece was actually, the end-to-end manufacturing time in the factory. This is something that Tesla is not only. I think they're already best in class at this, and I think they're going to continue to pull away from others. And there's a number of different metrics on this, but this this comes down to capital efficiency, and cost of capital is one of the biggest measures of the success of a business, success or failure of a business, and labor efficiency. And so capital efficiency and labor efficiency, if you can improve the speed of the product through the factory, so that's reducing or eliminating processes that are not needed. And then in individual process steps, you have the robotics and any manual assembly required that's actually balanced from the prior station to the next station. When I say balanced, I mean balanced in terms of time. As soon as you start building up inventory at a specific location, you start adding to the timetable to get the product from out the door. So what I believe Tesla does from a velocity perspective is, number one, they're very focused on minimizing, process or minimizing parts. The best part is no part, the best process is no process. That comes from the CEO all the way down. And I will tell you that that's very rare. At other companies, the CEO, like, well, I trust my engineering team or I trust my quality team. And I think Elon does too. But I also think he puts an overriding culture over them that said, the best process is no process, or no part. And if you eliminate process steps and if you eliminate parts, what sometimes people think is like, oh, you're cutting corners, getting product out of the factory. And the way to the way to properly do that is you map out what 100% functional test coverage is on a product. You say like, what do I need to know inside of the factory to know that every single thing that I added value to in the factory, everything I touched, everything I assembled, everything I transformed, if it came in from a prior step or if it came from a supplier, if I did any transformation on it, what did I do that really altered the state of that part? And if I didn't do anything to it, I should rely on the last set of data. So when I talk about when I brought up the part about velocity, it's really just the click rate or the output rate per car. How long does it take them to move a car through the factory? And I believe with Gen 3 and where they're going to make a significant step in the next direction. And I also believe when Tesla does portfolio planning, they're not just looking at, okay, well, we need something that looks like this. It needs to be a van or needs to be like this. They're also doing portfolio planning on velocity in the factory. What's the output per square meter in the factory? And because they want to take, Giga Texas today, this phase one, it's 500K capacity. I believe through product design and maybe retrofitting of the factory, they want to take that same square number of meters or feet and get it to a million. And to do that, you have to plan that from a portfolio perspective. You have to have a manufacturing portfolio. You have to have a kind of like an internal, almost contract book of like where are we going from and to and all these specifications. So I believe velocity is one of their big velocity and output per square meter are something that's measured very carefully inside of Tesla.
Yeah. In the last Investors Day, Elon made a big deal about how now when they design a new product, they have manufacturing. It starts off with manufacturing, how efficient they can manufacture it. And the Cybertruck was an example of that. It started off with manufacturing in mind before the design. The design became something after they decided how's the best, what's the easiest, fastest way for us to build a truck. That's how they came up with that design. Um, okay, fantastic. So we got the unboxing process, which is not till the new factory in Giga, Mexico. This is something in the future, but they did talk about how the Model 3, they were able to reduce its cost of goods by 30% from 2018 to 2022. It's all the things I think you've mentioned previously, but did you want to make a comments about this upcoming unboxing process?
Yeah, I think this is how, in the world of lean manufacturing, where it's basically like again, it's really focused on if you kind of look at the front of the factory where the material comes in and the end of the factory where the assembled product goes out, and they're really trying to reduce the number of touches, the number of tests, and in the case of the unboxing process, the order of operations and the parallel nature of operations that can be done. If you could, if you can, one way to increase velocity is to have faster stations, less processes, and more efficient processes. But the more things that you can do effectively in parallel will also do that as well. So I believe that's what they're trying to accomplish with this process. The order of operations, both for assembly and disassembly ease, and really focused on velocity and speed through the factory and just minimizing any friction going through the factory. So I believe that's what they're
Mhm.
focused on. I think they're going to take a huge jump. I believe the casted, if they're doing casted Model 3s now and then, the casted Model Ys, I think this is just going to be a whole, significant step in the right direction. When you go from these castings and you're getting rid of 70 parts and you're converting them to two, I mean, that's massive. And just think about the number of the material operations, any sourcing operations to make all those parts, and now you've got it down to two. Um, it's just it's mind-boggling in terms of the pace that they're going at. And it's all tied to the mission if you think about it. The mission is like, how do I get as much of this product out into the marketplace? And the way to do that is to have the best value per dollar, the lowest cost. And I think Elon said it's not just value per dollar that's going to win. You have to hit certain price points. And to get EVs to be lower than ICE at the low scale that EVs are today, they had to do all this structural innovation that I've referred to here to do that. And that to me, that's the big story. And that's the big untold story, I think, on Tesla as well.
Mm.
It's not talked to. That's why I pinned that tweet. I just don't believe it's talked about enough. Everybody believes that GM or Ford will just kind of get to it. Like their battery factories are coming up. They're going to have new cars in a couple of years, but I believe that they're at least a generation, if not a generation and a half, behind where Tesla is going to.
Yeah, and you've said before, generation is typically 5 to 7 years behind. Gigacasting is something that they've been doing for several years now. And in fact, I think just the most recent announcement was Ford is going to get into gigacastings, but very, very behind. Needs a lot of work to get there. Your favorite topic, Gigafactory location. It's unbelievable. To today, we now have Giga Berlin, we have Giga Texas, we have Giga Shanghai. Soon we're going to have Giga Mexico. Now we're hearing rumors about South Korea, Indonesia, and the most recent even India. So we're moving. Here we are, right? In just a few short years, we are no longer just manufacturing in the U.S. and we've expanded. Now, why don't you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, and each one of these has their own story behind it, but at a high level, if you could get your factory output closer to the final point of distribution, you're going to take a tremendous amount of distribution cost out of the total landed cost of the product. So in the unit economics, the final step in kind of the unit economics of delivering product is the distribution piece of it. And the closer you get your factories to those endpoints of distribution, you take all of that cost out of the system, um, or you take much of that cost out of the system. Even just having Austin to serve the eastern portion of the United States, they're taking their transportation costs, their trucking costs down, significantly in the United States. So as they put these factories, so the geography piece, that was the big thing. Is just like, especially a year ago when we had this huge spike in logistics cost and the cost per container, just the closer they have their end distribution point to where they're actually manufacturing, um, it's a huge. This is measured in companies. They measure something called kind of network or nodal analysis, and what they're trying to understand is how many days are in your supply chain. So if you have let's say this is the old Tesla from 2 or 3 years ago where they had to build a car in Fremont to get it to Europe. Well, today if you built a car in Fremont and you wanted to sell it in California, that may be just one day, maybe 2 days of logistics, maybe zero. But to get that product over to Europe, I mean, you're talking weeks of time. And in that time, that inventory is on your books, and that's money and capital that you can't free up to go procure more product and more components. And so that speed of your supply chain is what's key. So getting these gigafactories into these locations that are near the end point of distribution takes that nodal analysis, that's nodal span down, and reduces their cost structure. And by doing that, um, a couple other quick comments. The way Tesla enters these countries, I find fascinating because this is one of the things that I did a lot of in my prior life as well, which is expand manufacturing globally. And the way they entered, I don't think it's talked about enough, but the way they entered China, the the lease cost, the fact that they didn't have to hand over IP or have a joint venture, this is this is unheard of. Um, their approach and their leverage. And this is now only building up more and more as they become this predominant leader in EV. So I believe one of the reasons the India conversation was on ice for a couple of years is nobody was moving on either side. Tesla knew that where they were going from a volume and scale perspective. India's like, look, I have a protectionist economy. I've got to protect my labor. I've got to protect cost structure here. So in order to basically get an EV in, I'm going to charge you 30 to 100% tariff on it. So this geography thing is Tesla now is walking into each one of these countries with the upper hand.
Oh my gosh, Jeff. Oh gosh, we are all very, very spoiled to have Jeff's experience and his ability to communicate with us this information. Thank you for all this. We've got a lot more to cover still, but I just want to pause and say, Jeff, Thank you for this. I really appreciate you. Folks, follow him on Twitter at the Jeff Lutz. This is gold information. Let's keep moving. We have this as another way that can improve gross margins for Tesla inventory, which is weird. I don't, you're going to have to explain this to me a little bit. But I think the way I would think of it is this got something to do with the way that Tesla goes direct to market, it goes direct to consumer. They don't have a
Yep.
dealer network, and they have their variable pricing model. Can you tell me what you meant when you said inventory being one of the
Uh,
ways to improve gross margin?
you nailed it. It's lowest DOI in the industry, days of inventory. Um, and it's bypassing the dealer network, honestly. And those are all nodes of cost. Anytime you send inventory and it sits in a location, you've now added cost structure to your total unit economics. So if you can avoid that and go directly to the consumer, you know you've made out. Um, the other thing is, with on the dealer side of it, people say, like for example, GM shipped, I think, 612,000 cars or something, 660K. Maybe it was closer to 600K, I think, in Q1 in North America. But they put 412, or they have 412,000 cars in inventory. And what people say, well, that's in the dealer network, and that's not on GM's. The dealers have purchased those cars. It's still in the network. If you haven't sold it to the consumer, if it's in the dealer network or not, if it's moving slowly, if the velocity of that inventory is not moving fast enough, they're not going to buy more cars from you. The dealers aren't going to buy more cars from you for the next quarter. So that inventory does matter, whether it's, you know, from an accounting perspective, I understand the difference. But from a supply chain perspective, and what it portends for the future, the fact that 2 out of every 3 cars that GM makes in a quarter are sitting in inventory, I
Hmm.
I believe that that's highly inefficient. I believe that that's kind of old thinking, and I know they say, well, 60 days of inventory is quote unquote healthy. I believe they need to pull that number. I believe that's healthy on the old gross margin standards. But now, if you're dealing with a more quicker, nimbler Tesla who's running, anywhere from 12 to 20 days of inventory, you're way behind as an OEM. So I think they need to relook at that, and that's why I called it out as an advantage.
Yep, absolutely. Big one. Too bad we can't spend more time on that one. We got lots to cover, but you're Mr. Supply Chain. You are Dr. Supply Chain. So these are the long-term contracts that they're able to negotiate for every part, for every, batteries and so forth. And this is a big deal. So
We could
go ahead and
Yeah,
explain this
we
one.
could do a whole show on I mean, we could do a whole show
Yes,
on
we should.
supply chain. One of the more recent points I've made is, one of the things you like as a supply chain professional is to walk into these suppliers with credibility. And because that credibility helps, whether you're negotiating some sort of liability or some sort of expense or claim, you can say, "Hey, look, we're growing. If you want to ding me on this claim, that's fine, but you could apply it to future business if you'd want it." But on the supply chain side, Tesla has this advantage. Number one, they can multi-source. They have a flat supply chain. Again, they're not doing as much, um, um, I would say, external sourcing as other companies are doing. So, from a supply chain perspective, a very flat supply chain. They basically can walk into any supplier and say, whatever numbers I'm building today, they're going to be greater in the next quarter. They're going to be greater in the next year. And they can go back and they can pull up a chart of their last 3 years or 4 years or 5 years of of production and shipments and say, hey, look, if you partner with Tesla every quarter, you're going to be shipping and outputting more product than you did from the prior quarter. The other thing they could do from a supply chain perspective is they have a few number of SKUs that they're dealing with. And I think people get confused when they look at GM or Ford or Toyota volume and they say, wow, they're shipping X number of million cars per year. It's way more than Tesla. But you divide those by the number of models that they're shipping, and to a supplier, it's highly inefficient. It's not like they're shipping one of the same thing. Like, if in the case of Tesla, I believe and I think the data is showing this, 7 out of every 10 cars they'll build are the Model Y this year. So the Model Y will probably be up north of 1.3 million units. And I believe they'll be hard. That's why it's going to be the number one selling car in the world here pretty soon. You'll be hard pressed. There's maybe only other one model that's even close. That's a single model at another OEM. So the number of models being smaller, and then finally, I think with the introduction of the bot, suppliers know the bot is a couple of years away, but now is the time. This critical prototyping phase, these critical early tooling phases where you want to get in, you want to be an early supplier. And I believe Tesla is probably trying to work with some of their existing auto suppliers um, to leverage the bot in the future and say, hey, look, like I know we're dealing with hundreds of thousands and now millions of Teslas, but in the future we're going to be sourcing this thing that we believe is going to be 8 billion of volume or more. So what can you do for me today on the auto side, for and this, or I have these issues, or I need to get to this cost in Q3 on this spring that goes in the Model Y. Do you want to be one of my spring suppliers in the bot? Yes or no? And I don't that this is how it actually works in the real world. Those conversations are had. And there could be some nonlinear things that Tesla may be able to do with their gross margins that other auto manufacturers simply they can't do because they have too many models. They're flat on their growth or they're declining, and Tesla's not.
Oh, I'm glad we're talking about bots. I mean, I didn't cover that in this list. But
Yeah.
imagine what's gonna happen to gross margins across the board if the bot is even added. Just the cost of right, the number one cost for most companies when they build products is the human labor.
Right.
But it's crazy what will happen when that comes on board. Okay. We got more to cover here. Supply chain, part of that is the raw materials, the lithium refinery. They're vertically integrating beyond everything. Any comments on this one?
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments. You saw like, this morning there was a Ford announcement. They were partnering with a mine in a refiner. That's what people don't. It doesn't come out in the articles. They're partnering with a company in Canada for a deal for maybe 3 million batteries per year, enough lithium. But that's the lithium hydroxide. The actual stuff that's mined is the lithium carbonate or the concentrate, and that's what Tesla is opening that mine in Corpus Christi to do. So Tesla's going. Tesla's already. This is a multi-year deal that Ford announced in the future, right? And Tesla today is building something that's going to go one layer deeper into the supply chain to mine the raw material and refine it themselves. See, the Ford material, it's not mined by them and it's not refined by them. They're buying the refined material, which is what Tesla is doing today. So, future Tesla is going to now have this leverage, whether it's their material or not, whether it's Corpus Christi material or not. When they go do a deal with another miner or another refiner, they say, "Hey, look, like if you want to be in this growing business with Tesla, here's the price point we need you to hit. And oh, by the way, we're doing this internally, or we're doing much better than this." So it just gives them the leverage and it gives them the supply continuity they need for the future. So that's why we call that one out.
Yeah, nice. Next one is design process.
Yeah, this is I saw this came out for me in Investor Day, and it was
Yeah.
companies say that they do what they showed in Investor Day, but in reality, they don't do it as well, which is that that the electric motor design team, that is not just the design team. The design team pulls in the manufacturing leaders, they pull in the supply chain team on the procurement side, they pull in the supplier quality people, and they all huddle around a table as kind of one unit and like, hey, we're the motor unit, and we're going to deliver a motor that's at this performance, this energy output, um, and this cost structure less than $1,000. Where today, sometimes that direction will come from the design team or come from the product management team, but it's not going to like an integrated team. It's going to a design team that says, "Oh, okay, this is the best bill of material I can do to get to 1,000. Now I need the manufacturing team to figure out the rest." And what the way Tesla does it, it's all concurrent. They're all kind of sitting around the same table together. And while those that manufacturing leader and that procurement leader may go back and report to their individual VPs throughout the workday. I believe they work as one unit, and the success factor is getting that motor out at less than $1,000. So I believe their design process, the takeaway is I believe their design
Mhm.
process is more functional at the module level. They have kind of a super team that surrounds the module to deliver the module to market versus it going function to function to function in the company and then hoping the output is a motor that's at a less than $1,000.
Yeah. I mean, it's even deeper than that, right? The entire company is headquartered in the factory. So they're all working in the factory side by side with each other. And that was very, very important for Elon. Now you're seeing the benefits of that. So software is next, and we've got FSD take rate.
Yeah, and Tesla talks about the software obviously that goes in the car, but then there's the software that actually runs the company, their ERP software,
Mhm.
their test software in the factory. Everything is Tesla developed, and it's all developed under that similar mold or construct of simplified. Um, the best part is no part. The best process is no process. When you're buying these things from other companies, let's say you're buying an ERP system from wherever, an Oracle, whatever. Um, you're getting whatever they developed on the inside, and it's I mean, they have good experts and they do good products, but you're not getting the leanest and most efficient process that fits your business. And most importantly, if you design it and develop it yourself, you don't have to pay anybody a license. So when this goes back to the Opex line of minimize once Tesla develops that software and deploys it, all they're paying for is the labor to upkeep that software. They're not paying a license in perpetuity. So they have great internal software to run their factories, to run their logistics, to run every procurement, to run their test software in the factory. They're probably their engineering tools. A lot of things they do are probably internally developed, and that takes their cost structure down significantly.
Okay, well, the other one that we can take a whole episode on is FSD,
True.
full self
Yeah.
driving. But the take rate is something that's happening right now. We don't need to wait for regulatory approval. We don't need to have, improved full self driving just the way it is now. People are buying this and it's increasing. Tesla and Elon released data to show that the take rate is continuing to grow up. And he said it's going to look like a wall, the number of miles driven using FSD. And so, even just that alone, just the way it is now, as an advanced safety feature, people are recognizing this. But as it continues to improve, the take rate will happen. And then once it actually becomes an actual robo taxi, then it gets what he says nutty in terms of the margins that you can get on a monthly subscription basis. Any comments on this?
No, what I find is again underreported, underanalyzed is what will drive the FSD take rate is the fact that I don't have to make that decision at the point of purchase of the car. It's already in the
Hmm.
car from a hardware perspective. At other, obviously, auto manufacturers, you're either buying that software package at the point of purchase, or you have to, there's something that has to be physically installed in the car, or they just don't have the capability. And the total cost structure of Tesla's vision system, their computer that's inside. Remember, they developed their own silicon, and they went to Samsung to fab it. Um, and then they have their own camera system that they were again. I think they worked with Samsung on those as well. But the point is that the cost of that system, I believe, is a fraction, maybe 10%, maybe 20% of what you see out there testing in the wild today from other companies that have all the propellers and all the different sensors and mirrors and so forth on the car. And I believe those companies are still kind of in data gathering mode, and they have this superset of sensors on the vehicle. And what Tesla shipped is actually scalable. It's scalable today. They can put it in every car and not even worry about the gross margin loss. If somebody buys that car and never activates FSD, Tesla still has leading gross margins in EV. So that's to me that's the key takeaway is they've actually developed the hardware that goes in the car that's actually scalable to the millions, which I haven't seen that from others. Other people say like as soon as Tesla gets FSD on the road, somebody's going to have it within a year. And I don't believe that. Just knowing the hardware
Exactly.
development cycle times and
Yeah.
actually knowing the software and the infrastructure that's going to go into it with Dojo, I don't believe that that's just a less than 12 month. Nothing in my experience says that.
Yeah. I mean, Elon himself has said it's like a telescope, right? You need a telescope to find who's second. But yeah, it's massive, and it can be something that's added later. It's great, great point, Jeff. Great point. So the next two here are supercharger network and the insurance. This speaks more to the total cost of ownership, but they're massive potentials to help. You know, I don't know. You tell me, but basically, supercharger network is once they've done the capex of launching these superchargers out there, it becomes free for Tesla because they're going to use solar panels, mega packs. So the supply is cheap, and then it's free, and then they charge not only Tesla owners but all other EV car owners. So there must be some sort of benefit to the Tesla owner here. And then, of course, insurance, as we know, they can underwrite existing insurance companies out there so that they're much cheaper because it's based on your actual driving. Tesla actually knows how safe you are. Any points you want to
Yeah,
make
it's
about
it's
both of
all
these
data.
two?
It's all data on both of them. It's all data. They'll have the greatest utilization data from the supercharger networks. They'll know who's plugging in, if there's other manufacturers. They can sell to other car manufacturers at a higher premium. They could throttle the rates up and down in terms of the charge rates. They have full control. What other OEM owns gas stations is the way to, what
Mhm.
other ICE OEM actually owns the gas stations is the way to think of it. And we even saw in the last week, if you went to an Electrify America charger and you went back into the little shed where they kind of power these chargers, there was a Tesla Mega Pack behind
Okay.
that powering the Electrify America chargers. So how deep is Tesla? You know, not only are other OEMs trying to get onto their network to use them, otherwise they really don't have a usable product. But even in the competitive charging systems, they're using Tesla hardware. And if you were to take apart, it goes back to their design efficiency, Tesla design efficiencies in the supercharger as well. If you look at the number of components, if you look at the wiring, and if you look at the simplicity, and they've even taken another step, they prefab these chargers and bring them in on a semi and plop them in. So they've actually taken the number of days of installation down as well. They've really, again, they've taken what they've done in the development process and the simplification in the factory, and they've even applied it to the supercharger side. So it's pretty fascinating.
Okay. Oh, I don't want to spend too much time on this topic. We've discussed it so often, but you wanted to talk about minimal marketing. Gonna open up a
And there's
Hornet's
not
right
there's
now.
yeah there's yeah I mean when people say like what's the structural advantage? Well, today a GM or Ford spend a billion and a half, $2.5 billion a year in marketing, and Tesla's essentially zero. Maybe it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that is a structural margin advantage. I don't believe Tesla is going to get up into those rates of advertising that the others are spending. And remember what they're advertising. They're advertising something that's not as good as the product that Tesla is shipping. So Tesla won't need to spend that amount on advertising or even close, but it is a structural advantage for them today.
Okay, wonderful. So if we review the list that we just walked through, here's all the things that contribute to the gross margin. We just walked through all of this. And like we said, this is before scale. We now have, I don't know how many gigafactories there are. Fremont, Shanghai, Berlin, Texas. There's going to be new ones in Mexico and new ones even designed and announced
Nevada.
soon. We got them in Nevada. We got the mega pack factories. So volume growth, we are here. These two factories that launched last year are now in scale. And so I don't know why people are not freaking out right now. This is the greatest part about this whole thing. And then the part that I obviously gets us very excited. So this gets us to the high gross margins. So we're talking, 20%. It was as high as up to close to 30%. Now it's at 18% gross margin compared to the industry at 7.5% or less. But even more exciting is, Alexandra asked our friend Alexandra Mertz, Tesla Boomer Mama, was able to ask a question at Shareholder Day last week, and she asked the question, "What is the potential for the gross margins for the auto if you add in FSD and software as a service?" And he said 80%. So this was a big, big deal. I'm going to go ahead and play a little bit of the question that she asked. Is it playing?
Not yet. The video is up and still.
Hmm. Hmm. Don't know why it's not playing.
Maybe we can just, I mean, we know
Okay.
what was in the video.
Go ahead
We can
and
speak to
talk
it.
to it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love the way that Alexandra not only framed the question, but the follow-up, like the follow-up. It was like there was 2 or 3 levels of follow-up to get to a response, and I appreciated that as a shareholder, as you know, sometimes these questions, like, sometimes the analysts believe like they're asking the perfect question, like, "We're analysts, we know this business very well." And sometimes the questions just literally fall on deaf ears or Tesla doesn't wanna answer them on the earnings call, but the way that Alexandra phrased it and the way she went after the follow-up. So the 80%, this is gonna be interesting to watch. This is Tesla believing their utilization rate is gonna jump significantly on a car, and that there will be high, participation in urban areas where people would, allow, this vehicle or buy fleets of vehicles to have them, in use, around the clock. So to increase that utilization rate of vehicles from 10 or 12 hours a week to something much greater. So they're talking about lifetime gross margin, not again launch gross margin. Launch gross margin will be, the sale of the hardware plus any software that's bought at the time of purchase. But what they're really talking about is over the lifespan of that car, what it may be able to have in terms of contribution margin. So it'll be interesting to see. One, additional like segment would have been great on that question too, would have been like, okay, now if you just segment out hardware and then add in the software piece, like where do you think your peak hardware margins are going to get to?
Yeah.
This 18%, do we think we're going to get back up into the mid 20s, upper 20s, and so forth? That would be another interesting thing maybe to follow up with Tesla in the future. But the more exciting thing I think is just where Tesla is going to be more of a software company. And so where are we going to be hardware plus software?
Exactly. This is all the signs are pointing to a subscription model, and it's going to be the razor blade model. And so we're all so concerned and so focused on auto gross margin, but actually, several years from now, we're not going to worry about the auto gross margin. We're going to be looking at,
Yeah, I've
what do you
used the
call this?
term. I
Is it
think.
still called auto
feel-
gross margin? Yeah.
Yeah, I've used the term like it feels like we're drowning in a puddle sometimes. This isn't cataclysmic. What Tesla did, they basically have, they had to do this correction to deal with what's going on in the auto industry, and also really to correct and bring their prices back to where they originally launched, the product at. And over that time, they've been able to take their cost structure down. They will, like we talked about, they'll be able to take it down further. So I actually believe the last 2 years are more of kind of an aberration of like this is not real.
Right.
This was like we had, this is what was happening with inflation and so forth. So I believe they're bringing them down to where they need to be. And again, I believe they're a few quarters ahead. But the fact that they don't have that dealer network, they're actually a few quarters ahead of what's going to happen in the rest of the auto industry. The average transaction price is high in the auto industry, and now it's higher than EV, but it's actually coming down, and it's consumers are going to force it lower.
Yeah. And if you look at this list, like you said, it was an aberration the last couple of years, and I think at this point we're going to start seeing cost reduction appearing in the gross margin in the next several quarters. Just focus on scale. Just the fact that the factories are now, you said 50% scale. Now they're going to get up to 80% scale. Just that alone should already improve the gross margin. And so we're probably at the lowest gross margin there is. We're in macro. We're absolutely in a macro. So there's going to be more price cuts, small price increases. There's going to be adjusting it as we go. So that's still going to happen, but eventually the margin will maintain and in fact continue to rise again despite additional price cuts because of all these things that shows up. It will show up. We're here
And
already. So
one more quick point,
yeah,
Herbert. The reason why, you know, the GM and Ford earnings announcements are interesting. They're kind of playing it off of like, hey, we're not going to get in this pricing war. Hey, we're not going to do this. But when you go actually pull the carpet up, they're doing massive Opex reductions in all their facilities. Ford just 2 weeks ago closed
yeah.
most of their China operation. GM did the massive involuntary reduction. So they actually see what's coming in the future and they're acting now. Where again, Tesla did their actions almost a year ago. So they're saying one thing on the earnings calls, but when you actually see what they're doing, Stellantis, Ford, GM, they're doing massive OpEx reductions in their facilities. So they are also bracing for instability in the future. They see it.
Thank you again, Jeff. This was fantastic. This was what I was hoping for. We went through a good long list of things that contribute to Tesla's gross margin. There's more. I know people will say you didn't
A
cover
lot
that
more.
or didn't cover this. There's more. I know I didn't. I can't think of everything, and I'm sure it'll come up shortly. But thank you, Jeff. This is fantastic. I really appreciate you. You are a real value to the community, and I just very thankful that you're here. Thank you, everybody. See
You
you
as
guys
well,
next time.
Herbert. Thank you very much.